Yes, the thrilling sound of the Let's Talk theme tune. And joining me in the studio today, I'm Paul Raffel, by the way. Joining us today, Shelley Rugg.
Hello.
And Stephen Hurwitz.
I'm here again.
Yes. And it's Let's Talk, which is a listener call-in show. Let me just tell you what we are. We're getting to the root causes of the important issues of the day. This on-the-air community forum believes your voice matters and welcomes all thoughts and views without judgment. Please join today's conversation by calling 415-663-8492 or 8317. And when you call in, you'll hear a little electronic noise as I put you in the system. Just hang on until you hear me say, you're on the air, and then give us your name. Turn down your radio, and please keep the language clean. No swearing allowed.
Oh, no.
No. And so, today...
What are we talking about?
What are we talking about? We're talking about right-to-try laws, which I had never heard of.
What is that?
I'd never heard of it until I noticed there was an article somewhere about President Trump signing the right-to-try law into federal law. I think it was on 4 or 5 days ago. And I thought, well, that's interesting. That sounds...
Finally, he's doing
right
something
to try. This is wonderful. And it's about terminally ill patients who have tried everything else are allowed by this law to take experimental drugs or experimental treatments for their terminal illness.
Phase one of the...
If that drug is in clinical trials, and if it has passed phase one, which is, phase one is just when they try it on you to see if it actually kills you.
Oh, dear.
Well,
it's not testing the efficacy of it at all. It's just whether it's safe in certain doses, and they just keep upping the dose. And
so what's wrong with that?
What's wrong with that, exactly? And I thought, well, this is interesting. This is going to give a lot of people access to drugs and treatments that they wouldn't otherwise be able to get because the FDA wouldn't approve them or let doctors prescribe them. And then I read the article a little further, and it said it was backed by mostly Republicans. A few Democrats did, because it actually passed through the House and the Senate. A few Democrats were on board, but mostly it was Republicans, especially Mike Pence. And that sort of made me wonder, why are Republicans going all out for this? That sounds like it's going to help people in the health care, who are experiencing problems with health care when they're defunding health care as much as they can and making it more expensive for everybody.
Yeah.
What's behind this? And then I found out that California has a right-to-try law that went into effect in 2016, having been vetoed the first time around in 2015.
By, of all things,
by Jerry Brown. And then he signed it into law in California. There are 40 states that have right-to-try laws, which basically, I get the impression, now I could be wrong, and this is where the callers come in.
Yeah.
663-8492. I get the impression, and many people do, that this is all just about whittling away at the FDA and trying to, big government interfering with regulations. And
when the name Coke and Barry Goldwater come up.
The Goldwater Institute has been pushing this nationally, yes. That was another...
That's a giveaway.
And I kind of... glanced through some articles this morning, and I'm not remembering all the details, but one thing I kind of remember was that this law would take take the onus off of the pharmaceutical companies, but it would still be on the shoulders of the doctors. So the doctors could still get in trouble if something happens with the patient.
I didn't know.
Do you know about that?
No. I thought it sort of indemnified doctors from any...
No, it does that for the pharmaceutical companies.
And it does not require the pharmaceutical manufacturers to provide said drugs to the patient, even if the patient asks for it. It doesn't require them to do that. And it does not require health insurance companies to cover the costs. So here we are again. It's for people, terminally ill people, terrible thing, who can afford to go after experimental drugs. They can't. Some of the provisos are, especially in the California law, is that, like we said, it has to have passed phase 1 of a clinical trial in the federal law. Anyway, I forget what it is for the California law. You have to be terminally ill. So
that in itself is a real question because terminally ill. There are people that think they're terminally ill and that aren't, or that they have a relapse or for one reason or another live with terminally ill for years and years and years. So,
right. Well, and there are terrible diseases that cures are being invented for all the time that are not terminal. My late partner Donna had terrible trouble and pain and all kinds of things, but none of it was terminal, so she couldn't get hospice. She couldn't, all that. So she would not qualify for this either. They have to be terminally ill. They have to be given a diagnosis, I believe, I'm not sure about the federal law, but in the California law, you need 2 doctors' opinions saying that they're terminally ill and that they might want to try a certain treatment.
Well, on the face of it, though, it doesn't really seem that bad.
It doesn't seem that bad.
So,
except,
I guess, so I get the impression that with the FDA being involved, that they tend to slow things down, and they feel for good reasons.
Of course.
And this law would,
But
not
90% of all the applications to the FDA get approved. So
here's the thing. Yes, so there's already something in place at the FDA where it's called compassionate use. You and your doctor can apply to the FDA online. Takes about 40 minutes to fill out the form, apparently. You can apply online for a waiver on these drugs to be allowed to use them if they're available, and if they've passed certain, I think they wanted to go through phase 2 and 3 to actually test the efficacy of it,
right?
See if a drug actually works. And you can, 99% of cases, which has been like 11,000 patients over the years, they approve it. So you can get it, and they'll approve it within 4 days. And if it's an emergency, if it's something that we need this drug right now, we want to try it right now because it might save this guy's life, they will do it in 1 day.
Right.
So it's already in place. The FDA already has this program in place.
So it's really about taking power away from the FDA.
Yeah. That's what it's about.
Getting rid of the regulations that are there to actually try to keep things safer. Right. To be able to keep track of the results.
Right. Most famously, thalidomide. Right? That was the great victory of the FDA, was that they held up thalidomide. They wanted more safety tests on it. And we did not have the great, horrible, terrible birth defect rash of cases that they did in Europe, where it was approved more readily.
That's interesting in itself, though. There's the movement afoot to get rid of all the, when you mentioned thalidomide, all these safety measures that have been in there. People have forgotten about that. And, Wall Street also. I mean, now they're going to let the big banks trade like they did in the derivatives, et cetera. Sure. The memory from... Yeah. It's very short.
No history.
In terms of, so you're right.
No, that was a long time ago. The thalidomide was in the 60s? Yeah, 50 years
Yes,
ago.
that's
Nobody
right.
remembers. Who remembers
my
anything?
babies? Yeah.
Well, I think on some level it can sound good, to get government out of the way and deregulate, so that we can all have freedom to flow the way we choose. But the problem is that by deregulating these major industries that are already causing problems in our country, it's scary and sad.
Yeah. Well, especially something as important as testing drugs. Now, there are people, a lot of people are very upset with the FDA because it does take a long time for them to approve things, and sometimes it seems as if they're just holding it up just because because they're in league with the big pharma, and big pharma wants to know the demand before they release a drug, all this sort of stuff.
That is a Trump agenda, though, by the way, which is releasing these pharmaceuticals earlier than they are.
Yeah, well, he made a promise on the campaign trail that he was going to do this, and and on the face of it, wonderful. I could think of a lot of people who would like to have access legally to other drugs and not have to go abroad to get them. That was one of his big things. He said they were going to save hundreds and thousands of lives because of
That's a good question. How many lives have been saved by this?
Well, apparently there's a article somewhere that
I didn't catch that one.
hardly anybody.
Hardly anybody?
Hardly anybody's used these right to try laws.
So they died anyway, in other words.
Yeah, because doctors don't really know about it, and they're not even necessarily willing to go through it, and maybe there is some risk involved. What if they prescribe an experimental drug that does do harm to the patient? Who pays for that?
Right.
Anyway,
I think this is an issue. I don't think this issue is as important as the underlying issue, and that is that there is a strong contingency, Tea Party in particular, and those that identify with them, to essentially gut the government of any authority, any involvement. I guess you'd call this libertarian.
right.
And, is it Koch brothers or Koch brothers?
Koch brothers, apparently.
I used to call them Koch brothers. I got it wrong. But these libertarians, we need to really talk about libertarians, but somehow the Koch brothers do not like government, certainly don't like regulation of the oil industry,
Right.
and they're hell-bent on deregulating
all industry.
So they can make more money.
Of course. And pay people less, and not have stringent safety procedures, all that.
and have a fundamental ideology. They, quote unquote, believe in what they're doing, and they have the money behind them to actually bring it about or try to.
So it turns out I thought I haven't actually read to see if pharmaceutical companies are behind these laws.
They aren't.
From what they want to be.
They're not. They're afraid that these things could compromise the actual studies that they are doing. The very phases. From what I read, there's some concern that number one, I don't think they want to be able to use this data in their, and I can see why.
How do you mean don't want to use the data?
Well, people are taking this in a completely random, there's no way that people are actually paying attention specifically to how they're being used and under what circumstances. And, it's all, if it doesn't work, if it kills somebody, well, what does that mean? So anecdotal evidence, it just sort of muddies the water.
Yeah. And apparently most of the pharmaceutical companies don't make enough of these drugs when they're experimental. They make enough for the trials to work, but they don't do a big run of them because they don't know if they work or not, right? So first of all, they may not be available, some of these things. And if the pharmaceutical companies are not going to provide them, then
Well, then again, they had these.
this is all just show.
They
It's
had
just for
these
show.
AIDS drugs that came out, and
Right.
they were killing people. And they discovered later that it was the dosage that really was the big culprit. And so,
Yeah, it turns us all into the experimental rats,
but if terminally ill people want to be those rats, why
Why
stop
not?
them?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think they're being stopped.
If
though.
they
That's
can
the
afford it.
question. Well, come on.
Well, again, I mean, if it's only for the people who can afford to do it, is it really a humanitarian law? If they were providing ways for people on Medicare, Medicaid, whatever, to have the same access, that would be really something. That would be surprising. But, of course, that isn't happening, is it? Give us a call, 415-663-8492.
You want to throw us all
if
into
you
the
have-
foxhole.
If you have opinions
There's no.
on this.
We're all the same in the foxhole.
Of course, yes. Throw them in with the drugs. Throw them in the foxhole with the drugs.
What you got there, Paul?
Murray Seward wrote an email. When thalidomide happened, there was not, I believe, the kinds of warnings we now hear about possible side effects, part of every TV drug ad. Now we know more, which means that patients likely understand the risks that they are taking. A patient who doesn't want the risk can simply not try the drug, just like smokers who are now informed of the downside of smoking can still smoke and enjoy the benefits. Of course, the FDA should continue to manage sophisticated trials and research. That process should never be weakened. Indeed, research should be done independently of drug company influence. There you go. True enough. But that is as far as I can tell, that is the idea behind all this is deregulation, gradually sort of chipping away at the FDA and making them look like the bad people.
Well, don't you think there are, in so many ways,
Yeah.
don't you think we are overregulated by the government?
Ah,
I mean,
tell me more.
We're over-militarized, that's for sure.
I mean,
What regulations do you not
What
like?
would you-
well, all these guys down in the water who talking about storm surges, and they want to be able to raise their homes there, and I don't think that they really want to cooperate. These people want to. I mean, that's government regulation.
Oh, you're talking about the Coastal Commission,
Yeah, yeah.
California Coastal
Well,
Commission. Yes, indeed.
okay.
Oof.
There's a story. I don't know if I got it straight or not, but a person that I know was moving a wall in her house, and so she had some sheetrock and stuff out in the front yard, and somebody from the county came by and freaking red tagged her over moving an interior wall.
Yeah.
That's enough to make me a libertarian.
Well, there is that. Building regulations are there for a reason, however.
But do we overdo them? I mean,
Is it revenue enhancement for the county?
can I put a new refrigerator in San Rafael without a permit?
Oh, I don't know. Can you? Give
I
us a
heard
call.
that somewhere.
Give us a call if you have opinions about these right to try laws that are sweeping the nation. Pretty soon, most of the states will have these laws. I think it was vetoed in Hawaii, but nobody's sick in Hawaii. Everyone's healthy, and except when they're breathing the VOG. But yes, right to try laws. So there's a group of rare disease patient advocates, and this is in the ALS News Today, which is Lou Gehrig's, right? It's the ALS Patients Advocacy. They are against it. And they say that rare disease groups, patient advocates, are divided on whether it's a good thing. They do give an example of a guy who could afford to fly to Switzerland for his initial round of a radiation treatment that's experimental for what was it? Oh, pancreatic neuroendocrine cancer, same thing that killed Steve Jobs. He went to Switzerland, had some radiation treatment, a new treatment, new kind of treatment, and then came back to Texas, which was one of the first states to have the right to try, and they carried on doing the treatment there, and it worked, and he's fine, and he has, a few more years to live. And also there's this kid. Let me show you a picture. You've probably seen it. The 8-year-old boy in a fireman's helmet with Mike Pence.
With Mike Pence.
He's from Indiana, and that's why ex-Governor Mike Pence, is for this right to try. He says it's for children like this. Cute little kid, and they trot him out at every meeting. When the president signed it into law, he was right there.
Okay, so what's the story? I haven't heard this.
He's just he's a child who has a terrible disease, and they've tried everything, and his parents wanted to try something that they couldn't get, apparently. Although my guess is they did not go through the FDA thing. Anyway,
this brings up a whole different issue.
Potential for false hope, this group says. Yeah.
Brings up another issue. I hate to go far afield from this subject, but it is a tradition here. No, that is that
everything's.
You want to talk about puppies?
We're talking
sick puppies.
Go ahead. What?
Oh, but sure. No, that's too controversial. By the way, to talk about puppies.
Okay.
Every time, we're talking about our health care dollars, and Paul, you were lamenting that it's not covered by Medicare or whatever. And
I'm not sure about that.
Oh, okay.
But I'm guessing it isn't.
Okay, no doubt it isn't.
Right.
But it seems to me that we're stuck in this spot in terms of health care that we've got researchers constantly bringing out some new life-saving device or method or et cetera. And so as a people, we've come up with the idea that everyone is entitled to save their life. So even if it costs $100,000 for this new, you go to the hospital and you expect that, hey, I get the $100,000 thrown my way. So is there a limit to this? Is there a point where we say that these new discoveries, etc., are bleeding the healthcare system dry? Is there? Do we draw the line? Do we say enough? We don't have to save every single life except my own.
Wow!
I'm asking the question. I didn't say I had the answer.
It's a good question.
Well,
who are we going to choose to let die?
When you consider also
not this 8-year-old child in the fire helmet, I'm sure.
But most of us use our healthcare dollars in the last,
Yes.
year of our life. So, we're throwing money that could be spent on prevention for all sorts of stuff. I mean, I hope you're not listening, Gail, but my mother-in-law, she was in and out of the hospital so many times before she passed away, and I'm not saying that was a wrong thing, but she couldn't stand up. She was losing the ability to stand on her own 2 feet, and she would fall and she would hit her head, and this would happen over and over. And I'm not saying we shouldn't do what we can, but at a certain point,
right to die.
At a certain point, how about right to refuse? I know it's a tough. I'm just asking that question.
Sure.
I've asked it myself, so it's
It's a
right
good,
to
it's a good
refuse
question.
treatment.
I'm saying the ability of of our healthcare system to provide any treatment to anyone, regardless of the cost.
You want the treatment refused to the patient, not the patient refusing it for themselves.
Yes, that's correct.
Wow, death panels, man.
I don't know if I can be your friend anymore.
Well, maybe not. No, it's a question. I think it's a
okay,
legitimate question
so the
to
first
ask.
thing that's popping into my head is pets. Okay.
Pets.
So you have a sick pet, and you take the pet to the vet, and the vet says, well, it's very, very serious illness, and we can treat it all these fabulous ways, and it'll cost a whole lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
So, I think there's a lot of people that, faced with that, would have to say, I'm sorry, I can't choose that treatment for my pet.
True.
Now,
and then
turning that on to your family members,
put them away.
gosh, how would you feel if it was Gail in the hospital and she was refused this treatment that she needed?
You don't have to answer that, Steve. Gail might be listening.
Are you listening, Gail?
I am kind of putting you on the spot to make a point.
Obviously, each and every one of us would like to have all care necessary, and we'd like it, covered by the state, covered by the healthcare system. In terms of the pets, though, that is completely elective. So if someone
tell that to a dog lover.
Talk to a vet. Oh, sure, let's do I'll get my surgeon out here. We'll do a transplant or whatever. They look at it as just another human being.
When my dad,
let's put it that way.
When my dad was at the end of his life, he had cancer, and the doctor said, "Well, we can do a very disfiguring surgery, or we can keep him comfortable until he dies." Mm-hmm. And so, he had enough health care to pay for the surgery, but we didn't choose that.
There you go.
And I've done similar things with animals, Well, I can't afford that treatment, but what can I do at home? And I've actually been taught things I could do to help my pet.
But that's a choice that people make. If someone is brought into the hospital, though, unconscious, they really have a responsibility to do everything can.
Sure, unless they find
even if it's an 85-year-old woman.
Yeah.
Or a 90-year-old woman.
ERs will always try to save you, and then until they find
even if they don't want to be saved.
Right. Well, that's
Even
why you
they
should
don't
always
give
carry your advance directive with you.
Right.
We have a caller. Caller, you're on the air. What's your name, please?
Sally.
Sally.
Hello.
Hello.
I have one remark initially, which is anything that the Trump administration
is suspect.
signs is suspect, to say the least. I can't, I just can't trust anything they do, that administration and their motives. And, there's no real morality behind anything they do. It's all about business. So I agree that my inclination is to believe that it is about breaking down the FDA, among other agencies, which it has been proven time and again in an unabashed way that this is happening. And, i.e. the EPA.
Yeah. Well, that is their raison d'etre, is to do away with big government, do away with regulations, because
right, and the FDA. While business. I'll go for sure. I don't entirely disagree with Stephen that it may be overarching in a way, but I do feel like I don't know. I just think that there should be. In a way, that's a different story. If you want to look at FDA regulations and fight the good fight to ever improve that agency, that is a valid thing. But breaking it down, which in my own... Okay, so maybe I'm a liberal conspiracy theorist. I don't know. I really do believe Bobby Kennedy was shot by another person. Other than Sirhan Sirhan.
Undeniably.
That proves that I like conspiracies. But no.
I think even the same crowd has got his brother. They're all... Yeah. I just saw those Kennedy brothers as just bad pizza.
Bad pizza.
I've never heard that expression.
I got that from my parents, actually. My father invented that.
But the other issue you were talking about... with people sort of being the issue of forcing someone to take treatment that they don't want or keeping someone alive. This happened with my dear brother who was in intensive care with AIDS and in 1990, and he really was being kept alive on a respirator and a wretched tube down his throat. It was terrible, really, really terrible. He was conscious, unconscious. He was not comfortable. They tied his hands to the bed so he wouldn't pull all the tubes out. But he couldn't survive without that.
Yeah.
And so we did have a family meeting, and we all voted, except for my poor little mother, to let him go.
Yeah.
And my poor little mother couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I don't blame her.
Yeah, that's hard.
I was, saying, look at it. This is suffering. And,
yeah.
So now that I was a mother at the time. My kids were just little babies, but it was still hard for me to understand my mother's position.
I'm just curious, so after the fact, the whole family voted one way. I'm assuming they took him off of the support?
They did.
So
they were kind of anxious to do so because they described the condition of his heart, which had failed. His heart failed, and it's a terrible story. Terrible. He actually worked really, really hard on purpose so that he would kind of go into heart failure because he was afraid of the other illnesses that would take over, that he feared would take over, like particularly losing his eyesight. Because he had movie theaters. He owned movie theaters and collected films. And he was really afraid. I mean, it's a terrible story, and he chose to work very, very hard building a projection booth for the Anthology Film Archives in New York. He worked his butt off, and he worked his heart into a state of non-working, like it gave out. And interestingly, he kind of chose it. He was always a very hard worker. So that's another example. It's so upsetting. Well,
I'm just curious about your mom. So after the fact, the family dynamic, did things change? Did she come around to seeing that it was for the best? Or?
I don't think anyone could even talk about it.
Okay.
She was sad forever. She lived 9 more years. She was changed and profoundly sad.
Yeah.
And I sure can't, blame her. For heaven's sake, I was too. But, she really, it did have an effect on her health. It ricocheted in that regard. And she didn't, I don't remember her saying, why did you let that happen? I don't remember her challenging anybody.
But it was still hard, yeah.
I mean, maybe she really, she must have understood. But in that moment, my dad was there. My parents were long divorced forever and ever. But my dad was, I'm pretty sure, part of the conversation. And that may have held some heavy-duty sway in terms of her not, she did fight, but not, she was really outnumbered. Even his partner, who was there with us, agreed that we needed to let him go.
Yeah. So what if it had been like Stephen was suggesting? What if the treatment had been completely denied and your family had no say in it at all?
Stephen.
That's an interesting question. I don't know. I mean, I can't. It's like they were really chomping at the bit to do it.
The medical
they were
team
overwhelmed with, mostly young men, needing beds because everyone in New York was so sick with AIDS. The whole gay population was under siege, and lots of drug users and people who had transfusions with tainted blood. So many people, as we all know now. So I can't imagine it, but it's a very interesting question, Shelley. I'm sorry I can't answer.
That's okay.
Just allow me to stay on the line because there's more to discuss about this, but just allow me to do a little station break. This is KWMR 90.5 in Point Reyes Station, and programming on KWMR is brought to you by station members and the Bolinas Hearsay News, serving the Bolinas community since 1974. Information at 415-868-0138 during office and publishing hours, 9 to 12 noon on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. The Bolinas Hearsay News is available at most downtown Bolinas businesses. High-speed cable access services for KWMR are underwritten by Horizon Cable, now cablecasting KWMR on television channel 47 in Point Reyes Station, Olima, Inverness Park, Inverness, and Dillon Beach. Online at horizoncable.com. And KWMR is supported by the Fairfax Festival on Saturday, June 9th and Sunday the 10th in downtown Fairfax. Parade starts at 10 a.m. on Saturday. The weekend features live music, arts and crafts, activities for kids, a silent disco, an eco-fest and flea market, food, beer, biodynamic and organic wine tastings, and more. Information at fairfaxfestival.com. And yes, this is Let's Talk, and Sally's on the line. And interestingly, the FDA Compassionate Use Program actually started back in the 80s, I think, in response to the AIDS epidemic. And people who were patients and their advocates who were saying we cannot get access to any of the drugs that we need, and they said, okay, well, we have some drugs in the pipeline, and they put this, the access, compassionate use thing into effect in response to that. And apparently Colorado was the first state to enact a right to try law, and it was inspired by the movie starring Matthew McConaughey, Dallas Buyers Club, which was about an AIDS activist who would bring illegal drugs to AIDS patients. And that was what inspired the first right to try law in Colorado.
Fascinating.
And,
great film.
It says, politicians know a surefire winning issue when they see one. Sounds like a great idea? The truth is, such laws are utterly inadequate for helping the dying and the desperate. They would better be described as the right to beg laws. Yes. There you go. That's a bioethicist talking there back in 2014.
I'm not sure I understand what he's saying, the right.
Oh, you have to, because you'd have to get the drug companies to actually provide it, and you have to get you'd have to find a doctor that would do it. Well,
isn't that the same case with the FDA? They're not forcing these pharmaceutical companies to provide it.
No,
they're just giving permission.
Right.
So either way, it's the same thing.
Right. A right which, sadly, the terminally ill already have and already use in social media campaigns.
So I have a question. Where do bioethicists then, by and large, fall on in terms of
this guy?
Yeah, I mean, and there are other bioethicists out there in the world. I just wonder what if they are all in accordance about this particular law that was just signed.
I don't know. I think the most of what I've seen about the right to try laws are against it, basically.
Right.
Because it's giving false hope is what they're all thinking about, and it can be dangerous, of course, if it's only been through phase 1. Geez, you don't know if it's going to work, and you actually don't know what the side effects are going to be. Or
well, isn't that the point?
Yeah.
But people aren't caring about the side effects.
Because they're terminally ill.
That's right.
They have months to live. Yeah. It says right to try laws have been crafted by ideologues who, apparently, taking their policy lessons from a movie, still think the FDA is the main roadblock to giving the terminally ill their last shot at life. Why are such laws so pathetically inadequate? First, because they're restricted to the terminally ill. Many who are going blind, becoming demented, or losing their ability to walk are not terminally ill, and the law fails to recognize those.
People who are
That's
suffering,
a good point.
but they're not labeled terminally ill, so they don't have the same access.
Well, so if that's the argument, though, are you suggesting that people who are not terminally ill have the same opportunity to access these experimental drugs?
The original law, the original federal bill, actually had that in there. It wasn't just for terminally ill patients. It was for people with chronic disease, chronic pain, things that will not necessarily kill you in 6 months' time, but which are terrible things, terrible diseases, and that would have given them a right. But that was taken out somehow. It was amended, and it was,
Well, I don't know that we're a very compassionate society as a whole, especially now.
Me neither. No,
and here's the other thing. The other thing that everyone's concerned about is that there are going to be people out there who will take advantage of the terminally ill, and snake oil salesman says, finally, what if the drug you want is a crummy drug peddled by a crooked doctor looking to make a fast buck off the desperate?
Oh, we have a fine tradition of
really
that
nicely
in this country.
said, though.
Yeah.
Make America even more crooked again. Yeah, I mean, we have carpetbaggers and we have snake oil sales. We have that in the White House. I mean,
that's your opinion.
We
won't judge you for that opinion.
Well, I think what we're recognizing, though, is since the Tea Party was actually a fringe group in Congress, that we really were not paying attention to what the full effect of what their agenda was. And now that we have Trump in office, we're seeing what is still probably a minority group having taken control of government, and this is the agenda, and and they have enough of the Republican Party willing to support it, or frightened enough that they won't come out against it. So now this is what they've always. We're just getting to see it in practice.
Yeah, they were very clever. Very clever indeed.
Infiltration, baby.
Yeah.
Well, I like the right to try eating vegetables.
Chocolate.
Yeah. There's a showing of a film tonight called Secret Ingredients, and it's a really good film. I saw the first showing of it, and they brought it back to San Rafael for tonight.
Oh, it's an encore screening?
Yes, it's Secret Ingredients tonight at 7:15 at the Rafael Theater. And I highly recommend it. I'm going again because I want to deepen my understanding. But I felt that they did a really, really good job of explaining it. And I strongly recommend it, actually.
Yeah, good.
Yes, I think I promoted the screening on Magic Lantern right before that that first screening they had. And I will be interviewing, just a little plug for my show, this coming Wednesday, the 13th at 10 a.m. on Magic Lantern. I'll be interviewing Richard Peterson, who is the head of booking for the Rafael Theater in San Rafael. So he's going to talk to us about, what he's got coming up for summer programming and so forth. But he does a very good job of cherry-picking these really important documentaries. It's great that you're promoting that, Shelley.
Oh, well, thanks. Well, I did see it, and it had an impact on me, and it really cleared a lot of things up that I didn't really understand. And makes me really scared to go shopping in the market, honestly.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially...
you could be also afraid of restaurants.
Yes, restaurants are really tricky. I just went out of town for a few days, and, we had to just sort of do our best. I did find a couple of restaurants where we were staying that were organic, and so we tried to eat there.
Where were you?
I was in Southern California, Long Beach.
Long Beach.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, there's vegan restaurants, and the LA basin sort of has.
But are vegan restaurants always organic?
Well, yeah, that's the thing.
That's a very good question.
Yeah.
Yeah, good question.
I'm not even leaving. I'm afraid to leave the studio.
Yeah, no, don't leave. There's a sleeping bag.
We've got plastic in the fish. We've got who knows what's in the air, the water.
Yeah. You have the right to try to leave. Well, thank you, Sally.
I'm going to leave this conversation now, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of it.
Thank you so
thanks
much
for calling
in.
Thank you.
More. Yes, the line is open. 415-663-8492. Do give us a call if you have an opinion, or if you want more information.
Or if you have more information.
If you have more information than we do, which is very often the case, about right to try laws, the right to try for terminally ill patients, the drugs that have not yet been approved by the FDA but are in clinical trials. That's another one of the stipulations. They still have to be in clinical trial, and if they're taken out of clinical trial, then they're unavailable.
So, there's the side topic of getting bills put through, but it costs a lot of money to put a bill through. So only people with a lot of money can do it, like a pharmaceutical company, right?
Right. Or the Goldwater Institute.
And there's the wording, how they describe things so that it sounds good.
Right. Well,
and, you have to really be willing to dig deeper to find out.
Yeah, you have to be willing to read an entire bill.
Yeah.
I think it's a mistake to think that the pharmaceutical companies are in favor of this.
I'm not sure they are. Some of them I'm sure are, but others not so much.
Why are the Koch brothers interested?
Well,
what are they gaining?
Oh, it's deregulation. They just want deregulation of every government agency. Big government.
But there's some kind of payoff for that. Like, what is the...
Well, the payoff is that their industries, it doesn't really matter which industries they're in, the fewer regulations they think, the fewer safety measures they have to take, the more they have to pay people, all that stuff, providing health care or whatever. If all that goes away, then they make more money, of course, because they're not spending it on safety measures or... proper procedures that have been put in place for people's safety.
I think there's this fetishism, if that's the right word, about the corporate, how the corporate has the corporations do it better than we can do it ourselves.
Who says that?
Well, it seems that
neoliberal.
I think that's what it's about.
Ever since Reagan, for sure.
They're worshiping at the altar of the corporate. Know-how, and so now they can do a better job with our prisons.
Well, the way they're doing a better job is by not paying anyone a decent wage, and the prisons are set up so that we have slavery again, basically.
Yes, that's true.
I know. Yeah, no, it's the neoliberal government. It's what's happening. It's happening in the UK. They're privatizing everything. They're selling off the NHS. They sold off the railways long ago, and there's nothing but complaints about.
And it's hard when it's on the federal level, so we can say, okay, our community, let's say we can decide that we want to take care of the environment, and we care about the people who live here, and we want to have healthy food to eat and all of that. But if it's on a federal level, can't they just come in and spray glyphosate on the berry bushes if they want? I mean...
Point Reyes National Seashore, you mean? They do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that a big sigh?
Oh, man. The other big sigh is that the glyphosate is about to be re-upped for the next 15 years. It's going to be approved again.
But do they have to put
Monsanto to kick around
cancer-causing on the label now?
Out, so we can't even say the Monsanto word anymore.
Does that mean Hillary Clinton is now going to be on a new board?
Yes, probably.
All those years on the Monsanto.
So here's as we said earlier, the right to try movement is basically from the Goldwater Institute in Phoenix, Arizona.
What do they do?
Named after Barry Goldwater. They have raised millions of dollars to get these things through. They actually write the laws.
Okay.
They write the draft of the law. They send it out to all the states, and the states read it and go, "Ooh, it sounds good." Yeah. So they've been very successful.
That's
40
not the
states
only
so far.
law that's written. Just
No.
yeah.
It's by lobbyists, yeah.
Yeah.
And the justifications. Right to try laws give people with terminal illnesses the legal right to use investigational medications years before they might otherwise be available on the market. Fewer than 3% of terminally ill patients gain access to investigational treatments through clinical trials. Clinical trials, has always been a hope for terminally ill patients of many kinds, that you can get into a clinical trial. Maybe it'll help, maybe it won't. But they very strict rules about who they will let into a clinical trial. For example, if you have cancer and you want to try an experimental cancer drug, they won't let you in if you have diabetes or some other condition that will skew the results. And fascinatingly enough, this might have changed a little bit. Most clinical trials do not include women because their cycles skew the results.
Oh.
Hence remember the birth control pill? It turned out it was tested on men.
How do you do that?
Whoa.
To check their hormone levels to see if it would work and if it killed them. And no. Yeah.
I guess that's another use for prisoners, huh?
So it's yeah, sure.
Or military, right?
And apart from organ farms, of course.
Oh dear.
The only treatments under right to try laws are those that have already passed basic safety testing and that remain within the approval process. These are no different than the treatments currently available to the 3% of patients who are lucky enough to be accepted into clinical trials. So there you go. That's it all sounds good,
well,
but it really is. It's a libertarian think tank, and they're all about deregulation.
I think it was very difficult to get through the FDA. There might be some reason to do this, but if the FDA is already providing the access that people need, then
yeah, apparently they're doing it in 99% of people who ask about doing it, about getting those drugs. They will usually allow it.
So if you put a bill forward that says right to try, it suggests that we don't have the right.
Exactly.
So yeah, wow.
I don't know. I don't know enough about the FDA. If you dug a little deeper, there might be a lot of things that, as we sit here, we might have a different conversation about the FDA.
Right. Well, it's certainly, we've all had gripes about the FDA, I'm sure, and about government departments in general. Bureaucracy, the wheels usually turn very slowly, and people get aggravated, especially if you're, suffering from a terrible illness. Of course you want to have access to things. So that, in that way, I don't know, it's a real balance, this one. It's a balancing act. But it's being put through as something that is saving hundreds. President Trump said hundreds of thousands of lives will be saved every year. No. Basically, everyone's going, well, no, not necessarily. Over 1 million Americans die from a terminal illness every year. Well, unfortunately, FDA red tape and government regulations restrict access to promising new treatments, and when they do, it's often too late. So, that's the reasoning behind it. It all sounds good, but it's certainly a suspect piece of legislation, I would say. But it is available in California, so let your doctor know if you are terminally ill and you want to try a drug that is in clinical trials. You can get to the FDA, and apply to it.
I don't think we're putting ourselves in that spot of the terminally ill person who really is desperate to do anything they can to prolong their life.
Sure.
And if they have access to one of the things, it could be incredibly dangerous. It could be terminal in its own right. But what do they have to lose, really?
Exactly. That's
why they make good guinea pigs.
You say that it's not cynical. Some people are, they're not thinking of being a guinea pig. They're thinking of, hey, I want access.
I know that, Stephen. I know.
I know you do.
Well, there it is. the right to try laws. This has been Let's Talk. Thank you to all our listeners and to our caller today.
You didn't thank the moderator. You didn't thank the people that were on.
KWMR does not take a stand on any of the issues discussed on Let's Talk. Opinions expressed on this program are those of the hosts and callers and don't necessarily reflect the views of KWMR, its board of directors, underwriters, or members. Thank you, Shelley. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Paul.
Fascinating discussion, and what fun homework it was.